Welcome to Shadows and Crimes. Today, we're undertaking a deep dive into the chilling, really complex case of the Gilgo Beach serial killings.
It's a case that's been unfolding for decades, really.
Exactly. And this investigation, it stretched across more than a decade, but then saw a huge turning point with the arrest and charging of Rex Heuermann.
That was certainly a major development.
Our goal today is to thoroughly examine the details surrounding him, the suspect, but also, crucially, the victims, the incredible investigative work, and some of the really disturbing related information that's come out.
It's quite something when you think about how long it took, how they managed to piece together all these, well, seemingly disconnected threads to finally identify a suspect.
It really speaks to the persistence needed, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That kind of tenacity in long-term cold case investigations.
So let's start with Rex Heuermann himself. He was initially charged back in July 2023, right? With the murders of Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Barthelemy, and Amber Lynn Costello.
That's right. The women known as the Gilgo Four.
But it didn't stop there. More charges followed.
No, not at all. As the investigation continued, they established more connections. He was later charged with Megan Waterman's murder.
Also part of the Gilgo Four.
Correct. And then, really expanding the timeline, in June of 2024 came indictments for the murders of Jessica Taylor and Sandra Castilla.
In the Castilla case, that was a bit of a surprise link, wasn't it? Hadn't been publicly tied to Gilgo before.
Precisely. That was new information publicly. And then, most recently, in December 2024, he was indicted for Valerie Mack's murder.
Bringing the total charged murders to 7.
7, yes. And it's crucial to remember he's pleaded not guilty to every single charge.
So we're looking at a man accused of this string of deaths, stretching back potentially over 2 decades. What do we know about his life? His background?
Well, he had a pretty stable career, seemingly. An architect working in Manhattan since 1987.
A long time.
A very long time. His personal life, it was centered around Massapequa Park on Long Island's South Shore. Lived there most of his life.
And that location becomes significant later.
Very much so. A really critical point in the investigation actually happened in March 2022. A witness connected to Amber Lynn Costello's case remembered something specific.
What was that?
A dark green, first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche, the client's truck. And that vehicle was registered to Heuermann.
Wow. That detail, years later, becomes a massive lead.
Exactly. One of those small details that unlocks so much.
What else gives us a picture of him?
Well, in an interview, which has since been deleted, he called himself an architectural consultant, also a troubleshooter.
Interesting phrasing.
It is. He also mentioned sort of personally that he learned furniture making from his father. Gives you a small glimpse, perhaps, into his background, his skills.
Okay. And the evidence. Law enforcement seems to have built a pretty detailed case connecting him.
They certainly appear to have. A major component is the DNA evidence.
Right.
They've stated that whole genome sequencing, which is, a very advanced, detailed DNA analysis.
Much more precise than older methods.
Exactly. It linked genetic profiles consistent with Heuermann, or, interestingly, people living with him, to 6 of the 7 victims he's charged with killing.
6 out of 7. How? Through what kind of samples?
Through hairs. Hairs found either at the crime scenes or directly on the victims' bodies.
That kind of forensic link is incredibly powerful in court. What else?
A huge number of electronic devices were seized, something like 350.
It's 350. That's a lot.
It is. And prosecutors say these devices held a, quote, significant collection of violent, bondage, and torture pornography, dating back to at least 1994.
That far back.
Yes. And chillingly, some images reportedly showed mutilation, women tied with ropes, details that mirrored the injuries found on one victim, Valerie Mack, particularly how she was restrained.
That suggests a very specific and deeply disturbing fixation. Then there were the burner phones.
Right. These prepaid, often untraceable phones, he allegedly used them to contact the victims.
Okay.
And here's the crucial part. Cell tower data showed these burner phones were pinging off the same towers as his regular personal cell phone.
At the same times.
Around the times the victims disappeared, yes. And in the same areas near his Midtown Manhattan office and near his home in Massapequa Park.
So placing him geographically near key locations at critical times.
It creates a strong circumstantial link, tying his movements to the victims' disappearances via those burner phones.
And that witness testimony about the truck, the Avalanche, that directly pointed the investigation towards him.
Absolutely. That eyewitness description eventually led investigators straight to Heuermann's vehicle. And there was one more DNA hit, too.
Oh.
DNA from a pizza crust, something he apparently threw away. That DNA matched hair found on the victims.
Just discarded pizza crust. Incredible how seemingly random things become evidence.
It's a stark reminder, isn't it? Even mundane actions.
Now, legally speaking, his defense team is trying to separate the trials.
Yes, they've filed a motion for 5 separate trials, not one consolidated one.
Why would they want that?
Their argument is about avoiding a cumulative effect. They're worried that hearing about all 7 alleged murders together could unfairly prejudice the jury against him, making it harder to judge each charge just on its own evidence.
Makes sense from a defense perspective. It certainly sets up a complex legal battle ahead. Let's shift focus now, importantly, to the victims, the women whose lives were lost. The first 4 discovered in December 2010, the Gilgo Four.
Yes, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Barthélemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Lynn Costello. And tragically, they shared some characteristics that might have made them vulnerable.
What were those?
Very petite women, all under 5 feet tall, around 100 pounds, all in their 20s, and all working as online escorts at the time.
Let's talk about them individually.
Yeah.
Maureen Brainerd Barnes.
Maureen was 25. Last seen July 9, 2007. She told a friend she was going into New York City for the day. She never came back.
She was a mother.
Yes, mother of 2. She'd turned to sex work through Craigslist to make ends meet. There's a particularly sad detail that she'd actually stopped for a while, but then faced eviction and felt she had to go back.
Heartbreaking. And her remains.
Found restrained with 3 leather belts, and DNA recovered from one of those belts showed a familial match to Heuermann's wife.
A direct physical link found on the victim. Very disturbing. What about Melissa Barthélemy?
Melissa was 24. She disappeared July 12, 2009 from the Bronx. Also used Craigslist under the name Chloe.
What happened the night she vanished?
She apparently met a client, deposited $900, tried to call an old boyfriend. But what happened next is horrifying.
The calls.
Yes. Her 15-year-old sister, Amanda, started getting these awful taunting calls from Melissa's phone for 5 weeks.
Weeks of calls.
Taunting her, saying vile things. Eventually, the caller said Melissa was dead, that he would watch her rot. Just unimaginable cruelty.
Yeah, they traced those calls.
Some were traced near Madison Square Garden, Midtown Manhattan, and Massapequa. Melissa's mother also reported calls from her phone near Manorville around the time she went missing.
That element of taunting adds another layer of calculated cruelty. Next is Megan Waterman.
Megan was 22. Last seen June 6, 2010, in Hauppauge, Long Island. She'd come down by bus from Maine.
She was a mother too, right?
Yes, of a young daughter. She was last seen leaving a Holiday Inn Express, apparently to meet a client. Investigators later found she'd been contacted by the same burner phone used with other victims,
Connecting her directly into that pattern. And the last of the Gilgo Four, Amber Lynn Costello.
Amber Lynn was 27. Last seen September 2, 2010, in West Babylon. She worked as a sex worker and, sadly, struggled with heroin addiction.
And she's the one linked to the witness who saw the truck.
Exactly. The witness saw her with a client, described that dark green Chevy Avalanche, which, as we know, became that critical link to Heuermann years down the line.
Hearing their stories really underscores the human tragedy here. But the discoveries didn't end with those 4.
No, unfortunately not. Between March and April of 2011, more remains were found. 6 additional individuals.
6 more. Who were they?
One was Valerie Mack. She also used aliases like Melissa Taylor and was known as Manorville Jane Doe, or Jane Doe number 6, for years.
How old was she?
She was 24, last seen by family way back in the spring or summer of 2000 in New Jersey. Her partial remains were actually found first in Manorville, New York in November 2000.
So remains found years before the Gilgo Four, but not identified until much later.
Exactly. It wasn't until 2020, using genetic genealogy, that she was finally identified.
Genetic genealogy keeps coming up. We'll need to touch on that more. So Valerie Mack, found partly in Manorville. Jessica Taylor, too, right?
Yes, Jessica Taylor. She was only 20. Last seen working near the Port Authority bus terminal in Manhattan sometime between July 18th and 22nd, 2003.
And her remains.
Also found partially in Manorville on July 26, 2003.
The Manorville connection for both is interesting. With quite a distance from Gilgo Beach, suggests the killer was moving around, disposing remains in different locations.
It certainly broadens the potential geographic scope. Who else was found?
Karen Fergata, known for years as Fire Island Jane Doe, or Jane Doe number 7.
Tell us about her. She was 34. Disappeared around Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1996. From Manhattan, believed to be doing sex work. Shockingly, she was never reported missing.
Never reported missing. How were her remains found?
Her legs were found severed on Fire Island in April 1996. Then, much later, in April 2011, her skull and teeth were found miles away at Gilgo Beach. It took until 2023 for DNA analysis to finally link those remains together and identify her as Karen Vergata.
The sheer time spans involved are staggering. Years between discovery and identification.
It really highlights the immense challenges. Then there was Tanya Jackson, also known as Peaches or Jane Doe number 3, believed to be around 34.
Where were her remains found?
Partial remains found in Hempstead Lake State Park in Lakeview back in June 1997. She wasn't identified until December 2016.
Wasn't there a child found with her?
Yes, tragically. The remains of a toddler known for years as Baby Doe, found alongside Tanya. Just recently, in April 2025, the child was identified as Tatiana Dykes, only 2 years old.
A mother and child. That's just devastating. And one victim remains unidentified.
Yes. The remains of a woman referred to as Asian Doe were also found. Her identification is still pending.
Looking at all these victims together, it paints such a broad, devastating picture over many, many years. Let's pivot to the investigation itself. It all started, really, with the search for Shanann Gilbert.
That's right. Her disappearance on May 1st, 2010, after that frantic 911 call from Oak Beach, triggered the search along Ocean Parkway. And that search led unexpectedly to the discovery of the Gilgo 4 in December 2010.
So her case was the catalyst, even though she wasn't initially considered part of the same pattern by some.
Correct. Local police were first on the scene, obviously, but the FBI's involvement came later.
Why the delay?
They officially joined in December 2015. There were reports, allegations really, of obstruction and friction involving the former Suffolk County Police Chief James Burke. Many believe that hampered the investigation for years.
And Shanann Gilbert's death itself, that remains controversial, doesn't it? Officially ruled an accident.
The official ruling from the Suffolk County Medical Examiner in May 2012 was accidental drowning. However, an independent autopsy commissioned by her family's attorney found damage to her hyoid bone, which can suggest strangulation. Plus, her body being found face up in the marsh raised questions for some investigators.
And her 911 call was eventually released.
Yes, after long legal battles, it was made public in May 2022. A very disturbing call to listen to.
Years into the case, in 2020, police released a specific piece of evidence publicly.
They did. Images of a belt found near the parkway. It had letters embossed on it, looked like HM or maybe WH. They believed it belonged to the killer, not a victim.
And they launched a website, too.
Yes, gilgonews.com, a dedicated place for the public to submit tips, trying to generate new leads.
Now, you mentioned genetic genealogy, helping identify Valerie Mack and Karen Vergata. Can you explain briefly how that works? It seems so crucial here.
Sure. It basically involves using public DNA databases, like the ones people use for ancestry research. Investigators upload the unidentified victim's DNA profile and look for matches, even distant relatives.
Like second or third cousins.
Exactly. Then they build family trees from those matches, working backwards and forwards through generations to try and pinpoint the identity of the unknown person. It's painstaking work, but it's been revolutionary for cold cases.
Giving names back to Jane Does after decades. Incredible. The formation of a dedicated task force also seemed key.
Definitely, an interagency task force. That really allowed for a fresh, comprehensive look at all the evidence gathered over the years, combining resources, different perspectives.
And new technology.
Absolutely. Combining that fresh look with advances in forensics, and particularly that deep dive into the burner phone data we discussed, that's what ultimately led them to zero in on Heuermann as the prime suspect.
That phone analysis sounds like a linchpin.
It appears to be, connecting the burner phone communications and locations to his personal phone's movements. Very significant.
And even though Heuermann's been charged, authorities say the investigation isn't over.
That's what they've stated publicly. It remains open and ongoing. They're likely still exploring potential links to other unsolved cases, gathering more evidence. It's far from closed.
Understandable. Now let's consider the impact on Rex Heuermann's family. This must be an unimaginable situation for them.
Absolutely devastating. His wife filed for divorce shortly after his arrest. Her lawyer made it clear she had no idea he was a suspect, that she and her children were, quote, overwhelmed and heartbroken.
And the DNA link from the belt, found on Maureen Brainerd Barnes. That must add another layer of horror for her.
Unimaginable. To learn that forensic evidence potentially ties something connected to you to one of the crime scenes.
They have children.
Yes, 2 adult children. And their family home in Massapequa Park, it was searched extensively by investigators for days.
That must have been incredibly intrusive.
The wife's attorney described it as extremely disruptive, naturally, a total upheaval of their lives.
Has he had contact with them since the arrest?
His defense attorney has said there's been some communication with his wife, but she hasn't visited him in jail. The media attention is just intense, likely trying to shield herself and the children.
You can't blame them. The scrutiny must be immense.
Oh.
There was also some talk, speculation maybe, about their financial state based on the house.
Yes, based on the outward appearance and condition of the home, some people speculated that maybe his money wasn't primarily going towards household upkeep. But that's purely observation and speculation from afar. We don't really know their financial details.
Right. Important to stick to the known facts. Let's move to some of the related information and what might be inferred, psychologically, from the evidence. Prosecutors use the term blueprint for the killings.
Yes, suggesting the evidence points to a potential pattern, a method, maybe spanning 30 years. A very chilling concept.
And that ties into the violent pornography found on his devices.
It seems to. That extensive collection, especially the themes we mentioned, violent bondage, torture, tying women with ropes, it aligns disturbingly with the injuries on Valerie Mack.
That specific alignment is deeply troubling. And the taunting calls to Melissa Barthelomew's sister. What does that suggest psychologically?
It points towards, well, a sadistic element, a need to inflict additional emotional pain beyond the physical act, a profound lack of empathy, perhaps enjoying the family's suffering.
And his alleged continued use of burner phones to contact sex workers even after the bodies were found.
That suggests a compulsion, perhaps, a deeply ingrained pattern of behavior that continued despite the discoveries and the growing investigation.
The details about his specific online searches are also quite alarming.
Extremely. Reports mention searches for graphic images involving child abuse, bestiality, torture, images of murder victims. It indicates a range of very disturbing sexual paraphilias and interests. Investigators will be looking very closely at those potential motivations.
And the fact that he was reportedly searching for information about the Long Island serial killer investigation itself.
That's also significant. It could suggest an effort to monitor law enforcement's progress, maybe learn what they knew, potentially to help evade capture, or perhaps a morbid fascination with his own alleged crimes.
There are also some really disturbing reports about digital content possibly linked to his daughter. This is a very sensitive area.
It is, and highly disturbing. Reports described accounts possibly connected to her containing extreme gore, violent pornography, themes of cannibalism, dismemberment, even artwork she allegedly created depicting graphic violence.
And potential, though maybe speculative, links to case details.
Yes, some have pointed out potential links. Sandra Castillo was found missing a shoe. Disturbing content reportedly viewed by the daughter involved hanging victims missing shoes. The dismemberment of Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack has been speculatively linked to the daughter's reported interest in, well, extremely graphic content, sometimes called hardcore or cannibalism themes.
And the marsh setting.
Shanann Gilbert was found in a marsh. An image reportedly viewed depicted a woman lying in a marsh. There was also mention of basement imagery with blood, potentially relevant to the house search. It's all very unsettling.
If true, it raises profound questions about the environment inside that home. The reported presence of books on death scenes and sex workers just adds to that disturbing picture.
It does. You know, while most serial offenders act alone, the question of potential awareness or even complicity by others in the household inevitably arises in situations like this, even if it's rare. It's something investigators likely considered, though it remains speculation currently.
This whole case is just layer upon layer of tragedy, darkness, and so many unanswered questions. It really hammers home the dedication needed for these kinds of investigations.
And the devastating, lasting impact on the victims, their families, the whole community, it's profound.
The evidence presented so far is certainly grim, but the legal process has a long way to go. It's vital we remember that, and the pursuit of justice continues.
Absolutely. Remembering the victims is paramount. While respecting the ongoing legal proceedings, there's still much we don't know for certain.
Thank you for joining us on Shadows and Crimes podcast. If you like today's topic, then please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon.